All right. Welcome to the show, Sharon. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to share some awesome insights with us today.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. I wanted to invite you on because I know that my audience are, they're in the earlier stages of their business and, tracking leads or tracking anything really isn't usually a big priority. It's sort of like, how do we survive? How do we make money? But I do know that it is really important to make sure that you understand, what you have access to, how many people are in your pipeline. So I wanted to bring you on today because, that's what you're all about. So it's really exciting. The first question I have for you is, where do you think most coaches or entrepreneurs go wrong when it comes to keeping on top of their leads and making sure that they're taking the right actions at the right time in order to convert these leads into clients?
Oh, I love that. So I think the number one thing is, like you said, actually taking the action and tracking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Paying attention to how much money is in your pipeline. A lot of business owners, they get into business because they're really passionate about what they do. They're really good about what they do, but they might be uncomfortable with marketing and they might be uncomfortable with sales.
Mm-hmm.
And there is so much like stigma and taboo around talking about money, and like sales feels like it's a, maybe a shameful or a shady thing, but it's really not. It's really about communicating the value that you're bringing. And if somebody's interested in working with you, like, who are you to decide that, they don't want to work with you?
Yeah.
So as far as like where do they get it wrong is like, one, just not tracking, and two, giving up after the first contact.
Right. Yeah, that's
Sometimes
a big one.
Sometimes it takes more than one.
Yeah, because especially, if you're not really super confident in sales, it could feel a bit like, oh, I don't want to get rejected, or I don't want to harass people. But, like I always try and tell people, selling is serving,
Yes, I love that. And you have to think about too how you've been as a client. I always like tell people, think about like your experience. Like you probably didn't like click on a Facebook ad and then buy something the first time you ever saw that person, right? Mm-hmm. Or even if you're doing something, high ticket, like working like with a coach or with a trainer. I know you have a lot of health professionals, depending on like how big how high of ticket items they are, you might have to kind of understand what the packages are, and maybe you have to save for it a little bit. So I've never been like offended when somebody reaches out and says, hey, were you still considering, or I have this new package coming up or a new offer. And you're like, oh my gosh, actually that's perfect timing. I was just thinking of you, so putting yourself into your client's shoes is always amazing.
Exactly, because people get busy and they're not there thinking about your business and how you can help them all the time. Sometimes I need that reminder. So that's really awesome.
Exactly.
Cool. So the next question I had for you is, can you break down what like a sales pipeline is? Sounds like a fancy term, but
I know it does sound really fancy and corporate, right? I mean, a sales pipeline is really just a visual representation of where your clients are in the process. So, For example, you could have it like, if you think of it in like a graphic, kind of way, you have like all these different containers, and you have the first container, which is maybe first contact, and the second container is a sales call, and the third container is a signed contract, right? And so if you are going through the sales process with someone, you're moving them from one container to the next. Another way that I like to look at it is like whether it's cold, warm, or hot. Mm-hmm. If it's cold, maybe it's like a first contact and they don't know what you do yet or anything. They're just kind of like, maybe they're just trying to inquire. It's warm when they're like, oh, I am interested in working with you. I want to better understand your services. And it's hot when they're like, yes, I want to work with you. But that contract has not been signed because it is not closed until there's money.
Yeah. And it's so good to be able to visually see that and understand, because sometimes it can feel like nobody wants to work with me. I don't have any leads, but really you have opportunities sitting there, but you've just forgotten about it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially like when I think of it from the cold to kind of hot perspective, I've definitely had experiences where someone will come in hot and they're like, I want to work with you. I'm ready to sign up tomorrow. And actually, this is a very a true story. There was a gal and she was like, okay, I'm ready to go. And so I sent her the contract. I didn't hear from her. I did a quick follow up the next day because I was like, okay, we were supposed to start. And then, I didn't hear back. So I was like, oh, okay. So I just kind of put her in that colds category for a little bit and then reached out like 2 months later. And she was like, oh my gosh, I had like this huge thing happen with my family, but I'm ready. Can you resend it? Resent it, started the next day. And that was like a $5,000 contract. So it's just like, oh, okay. Even though it felt like it was cold and maybe I was like rejected or something like that, just a simple follow-up a little bit later. And it was just like, oh, okay, cool. Nope. It was just bad timing.
Yeah, I have clients asking me about that all the time. They've had someone say, "All right, I'm ready to go," and they send them everything, and then it's like crickets, and you're like, "Did I do something wrong?" Like asking yourself all these questions. But it's definitely, yeah. So I guess another question I'll throw in here is like, how long do you think you should wait after that happens before you reach out again?
So, I mean, I don't think that there's a certain science to it. Like, I can't really say it's going to be different for each person, right? Especially like, I mean, if you have all of your package details online, they're going to be at a little bit different stage, versus if you don't have any details, kind of thing. But what I like to say is definitely like somebody reaches out, follow up the same day or the next day, like as soon as possible for that first follow up, and try and schedule that sales appointment or that next step. After the next step, give it another few days or a week if they haven't like followed through to the closing. And then after that, give it a month or so. So it's just like each time it's a little bit of a step. So, a day, a week. And then after that last contact, wait a month or so and then reach out again.
Right.
But I think what's important is for you to make sure you're following up at least like 5 times total, or until you get a no, of course.
Right.
If they say no, then like let it go respectfully. But it's like, don't just do once or twice, like definitely give yourself that time and then understand for your business and like your sales cycle, what's working for you. And then just kind of use that consistency.
Okay. Would you say that different types of businesses have a different amount of follow-ups that you need to do, like depending on your industry or what you're selling?
Oh, absolutely. I would say like higher ticket items take longer. Definitely like anything corporate. Like if you're in website design, I actually ran a digital marketing agency for years. And so like the sales cycle for that would be like 6 months, sometimes up to a year, because it was like, people had to plan for it, or they had to like, let other contracts finish or whatever. So I was very comfortable and knew that it was a long sales cycle. Sometimes I would talk to someone once and I wouldn't follow up until 2 months later. Right. If it's something lower ticket, then like usually it tends to be a much shorter sales cycle.
Okay. But it's still beneficial to track how long it's taking or how many follow-ups you have to do for each client that you sign, because then you have that data, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So with this pipeline that we've been talking about, what stage do you think of that? Do you think that most leads sort of get lost or forgotten about?
Definitely like after the first, and sometimes this is actually crazy. I've seen this happen so many times. I don't know if your clients have dealt with this. In my years of experience, it happens a lot. People will get lost like when the client actually asks for the proposal. Like they'll kind of like put off like putting together the proposal, especially when they're very new, because they get nervous and scared and everything, and they'll actually lose the lead because they've took so long to put it together. Maybe it only takes like 5 minutes or whatever to put together a proposal or an agreement, but because of fear, they actually let it sit for a long time. And so they might actually leave people at the hot stage because of that like fear and insecurity.
Wow, that's crazy. I've never really thought about it that way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know for myself, that's how I was when I first started. It's like someone would ask and then I would just like overthink it and then like, go over it 30 times, especially if it was like a bigger proposal, and, just try and make sure everything was perfect, and then probably change things I didn't need to change, and just like delay the process as much as possible. And I probably would have had a higher closing rate in those early years if I would have just like been like, okay, like just, it's good enough, get it out there and like respond with timeliness versus like perfection.
Yeah, I think this is just giving me like flashbacks to when I used to do contract work as a marketer, and you get the yes on the phone, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do up a proposal, or the contract, all this sort of thing. And you sort of just sit back and like, oh, I've got it. They've already said yes. You take your time, and that can actually really end up, losing you the job.
Oh yeah, well. I know. Exactly. And I mean, being on the hiring side too, like that's where people like, I mean, I'm surprised, now I do a lot of hiring for other clients too. And so I'll be like, oh, send me a proposal, and then it'll take like a week, and I'm like, okay, at this point I've already made my decision. Like you missed out. So I've been surprised being on that side, how long it'll take somebody to get a proposal at times.
Wow. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I know you have an app. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, but I wanted to ask you, what's a simple way to track leads manually? So if you're just getting started and you just want to sort of put something on a whiteboard or on a spreadsheet, what would that look like? What's involved with that?
Yeah. So what I love about like what I like tracking for leads is that it's a little bit more detailed. I personally used a whiteboard for years. I would occasionally kind of move it over to my phone, but there's something about like having it in a whiteboard where it's like, you know, you can see it like throughout the day. That's super helpful, but it's really what you're tracking. So you want to track like the name of the lead, obviously. But I also say record, make a note of where the source came from. You want to know, was it a referral, website, Instagram? You know, we get leads from all over the place, right? Because if you're doing a lot of social media or podcasts, like, so keep note of that because you want to be able to know where's your money coming from.
Yeah.
The next thing that you can note is the next follow-up date. And then the temperature, is it, you know, cold, hot, warm? And then finally keep a running tally. Like, let's say you have 5 leads on the board and you have these different pieces lined out. Have a running tally of like how much you think that client's worth, whether it's based on, you know, your average price of a package or you, whatever you think that they're like would be a best fit for them, whether if it's low ticket or high ticket. So that way you have a running number of how much money is in your pipeline at any given time. Because having that number makes the biggest difference. It really can set the tone for how you're spending your like marketing and sales energy and time, right? If you're like, okay, I have like, you know, $100 in my pipeline, I need to do something and fill that up. But if you can look at your pipeline, you know, on your wall, because it's just a visual representation, right? So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. But if you can look at it and say, okay, actually, I have like $40,000 up there. I need to go through and close some stuff. And I probably need to just follow up, then you can kind of better plan how your business and have a good idea of how your business is doing at that time as far as like sales.
Yeah, I love that. And I think also it would be quite inspirational to see, or even motivational to see that on your wall and think, and actually maybe even help you to come up with some creative solutions for how to close these people, right? Rather than just thinking, oh, this is going to be too hard or they're not ready. You know, seeing that there is keeping it front of mind for you and making you think, okay, what do I need to do to close this deal? Like I need that money in my bank account and I need to serve this client. So how can I make that happen? So that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And like, that's why with spreadsheets, like I get it. Like I love spreadsheets, you know, but I feel like we don't really check them as much. I don't know how many times I've like set up a spreadsheet and then not looked at it again for a year. Maybe that's just me, but I am not one to just like have a spreadsheet open 24/7. If that works for you, then like more power to you. That's why I'm like saying like the whiteboard, it's like always up there, whether your laptop is open, closed, or whatever. It's a good visual representation of what should be important in your business, which is sales, right? Not something to be avoided or waited, you know, for the end of the day or the last thing that you do. It should really be a priority, setting aside time every single day to say, okay, this is my 30 minutes of focused sales activity. And that can be the starting point for that. Just a side note too, as you were talking about like, okay, let's get creative with how we're going to close this. I mean, I always tell people like add some value, especially at like the second or third touch point, like send them a blog, you know, it can be your blog or somebody else's that is relevant to them. Send them some inspiration. Like the chances are when we're talking with a client and they're officially like in our pipeline, you know, we're already thinking about them because like as passionate entrepreneurs, like that's just how we are. Right. And so you probably will see something, or you might even have a blog that's written that would be such a perfect fit for them and help them kind of with that process and just send it to them. You don't have to say, hey, did you still want to work with me? You know, you can be like, hey, I know you're thinking about working with me, but I wanted to go ahead and just send you this blog. It might help give you some clarity. You know, I have a blog that's called like, you know, how to find the right marketing coach or something like that. And so I'll send that to people and it's very like open about like, hey, I might not be a good fit for you. And here's why. And so it really allows them to make the decision for themselves and help move them through the buying process without feeling like pushy or salesy.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm just remembering now the first business coach that I ever hired. And this was, you know, a lot of money for me. So it was quite scary. But for like a few months, he was sending me so many freebies. He was giving me, you know, tips on how to sign clients so I could make that money so that I could pay him. And, you know, when we're talking about, let's refer this back to health and fitness coaches, you know, it's like giving specific, advice on certain types of foods that you could be eating or different training styles that you could be doing and just giving those tips without really asking for anything in return and just being that person that is helping them. Because then when that time comes, when they do decide, all right, this is it, I've got to do something, I've got to make a change, you're the person that's been speaking with them the whole time and giving them help. Like that'd be crazy to look elsewhere.
Oh yeah. I mean, I always think of like when those value added things or those like freebies at that stage, And it's just to think about like what are going to be their biggest like objections, and then find a way to address those in a creative way. So I think for like the health industry too, it might be cool to do something about like mindset, even like, you know, because I know some people like will be excited. I know I worked with a gym in Atlanta at one point, and like, you know, people would be excited to like work with them, and then they get kind of nervous about actually like going in. And, you know, he worked with a lot of people that had like, you know, eating disorders and things like that. So it wasn't always the most comfortable thing. So he would send them, you know, some blog posts and some articles about like, you know, getting your confidence and like what to expect and like that kind of stuff. So it kind of alleviated that pressure. So they'd feel more comfortable, like actually taking that next step to closing and like showing up. Right. So I think if that's something, if you have something consistent with your clients that's coming up where they're like, okay, well, I was thinking about it, but you know, XYZ, find a way to address that in a way that's like very gentle and value added and something that will make a difference for them, like whether or not they decide to work with you.
I think that's actually where podcasts come in really handy. Like this has helped me in the past where I've had a lead and they're not quite ready yet, or they have some hesitation, or they don't know how to get started. And it's only really so much you can do through Messenger, and maybe they're not ready for a call yet. Send them to a podcast episode. It's just like you said, send them to a blog, and it helps so much and it nurtures them behind the scenes. So you can reach out to them later and they've been listening and learning from you the whole time.
I know that's what I love about social media is because it like builds that entire customer relationship. It builds the like, you know, no like trust factor, right? Like before you don't even have to talk to them. It's like, you know, you just build that relationship over social media. They watch your content. I mean, that's why I always say like create like amazing content so people can get to know, how do you think? How do you make decisions? Like, what are your ideas? What have you accomplished? And then you don't have to like have those conversations one-on-one. They can just like follow you and get to know you. Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about your app now. It's called Pretty Simple, the leads tracker that motivates. It's available on iOS only, is it?
Right now, yes.
Cool. Tell us about it and how it compares to the whiteboard situation.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is definitely my first like tech venture after being a full-time entrepreneur for, you know, over 10 years. But basically it was just that, like, I got tired of having things on the whiteboard. I'd go out networking and stuff, and I wanted to keep track of things. I didn't want to use a spreadsheet. I didn't want to use some of the other options that are like expensive because, you know, solopreneur, like I don't want to spend $50 a month on a CRM or anything. I didn't want anything that was like complicated to set up. Right. And so, I created this app called Pretty Simple, and it literally, like all the things that we talked about, it's in there. It's completely like, you know, self-sustaining. There's no integrations at all. You just like pull it up, you add your lead, you choose the temperature, the source, the value of the lead and everything. And then you have a nice little layout where you can either look at it, it's just in your pipeline view, where is it like, you know, cold, warm, or hot, and you can drag and drop. Or you can have your follow-up view where you can just see chronological, all the different leads and who is you need to follow up with next, right? And I think my favorite part of the app is that it does have the money on the table little graph right there. So you can always see like, okay, that's how much I have on the table right now, and I can go and do something about it.
That's really awesome. And so how is it just you search in the App Store?
You can go to prettysimple.app, and you can, that's the website, and you can look from it there. But it is also in the App Store. It's pretty easy to search. There's a 14-day free trial. And because I am a solopreneur and have been for a long time, I wanted it to be affordable. So it's only $4.99 a month. But there's a 14-day free trial. So you can just like log in, add in all your leads, see how you like it. And if it's something that makes sense for you, then cool, you can keep using it and it's not expensive.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a good idea too. And I'm sure you're helping so many people already with it. So for those of you that are listening, make sure to check out, so it's www.prettysimple.app, and you can go there to download it. And as Sharon said, start the free trial, which would be awesome. Also, if you want to connect with Sharon online, you are on Instagram and Facebook. And it's just your full name. I'm going to try and say this. It's Sharon Gutierrez, is that right?
Pretty close, Sharon Gutierrez. But you might want to drop it in the description too.
I will. I definitely will.
Spelling it might be a little harder for some people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Sharon, for coming on the show. And for those of you listening, make sure to connect with Sharon, and also come over to my Instagram, It's Me, Sally Lee, and let me know what your favorite part of this episode was. Thanks again, Sharon.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. Thanks.